Give it up for Rafa Esparza and Asher Hartman.
Yay. Thank you so much for inviting us, and it's so nice to be in conversation with you. I admire you, so much.
Likewise. Where in the city do you reside?
I'm in Altadena at the moment. Where are you?
I live in Boyle Heights.
Oh, yeah.
But I grew up in East Pasadena, lived in Altadena when I first left my parents' home, and then lived all over like downtown, Lincoln Heights, and yeah, Boyle Heights is where I went to school at East LA College for the first half of the 2000s, and I loved the history there, the culture, and always imagined myself kind of like coming back to the East Side to kind of like live in. I've never left LA. I've lived here most of my life, but I think what I love most about Los Angeles, I think what most people hate about it is like how vast it is, how like long it takes you to get from one place to the other. I think that's what like allows for more mystery and kind of like you don't really fully ever get to know the city.
When I came here, I thought, this place is so ugly. But I also really, really love it, as a creative space, and especially as an artist. I think it's one of the most generous places I've been.
The places that I've gravitated more towards, that I've had opportunities to kind of like speak to with performance, have been places that pull me.
Yeah.
And so I only started driving like maybe 3 years ago.
What?
Yeah.
For real?
So,
I know that.
I grew up using public transportation, or shitty like public transportation.
Yeah, it's so bad.
When I was in school, I would commute on the GO line. When I would go to UCLA, I would just take like 3 buses to get there. But it like I always tell like people that move to LA to like not get a car and just try getting around on the bus. It's like the best way to get to know the city. You'll never get to experience it otherwise. Well, like that otherwise. And so the places that I used to like, I would sometimes like, there's a lot of, when you're not in a rush to get somewhere, I would use moments in between, like waiting for the next bus to just kind of like walk around the neighborhood. And sometimes like places would literally kind of like pull me for whatever reason. Maybe it was a sound.
What's the first memory you have that you can call to mind? I don't know if you can, like of the place that just sort of drew you in.
I've had like a long time relationship with Elysian Park, and I think initially went as a teenager. My father, I remember, like coming home and complaining about like all of the faggots at Elysian Park that would try to come on to him. And I was like, what park was this? and I remember going like as a scared, like closeted teenager, but also very excited. And I went, and I was too nervous to do anything, but I remember like experiencing like the energy of cruising for the very first time. That place is also like marks maybe like, I would say, the beginning of working in a place where you're not necessarily like just plopping down a work of art, but you're like responding and you're listening and you're building a relationship to the space, and you're thinking about the people that frequent that space.
It seems like some of your work too is like the ghosts of people who were there or kind of traveled through there, so present, especially in those outdoor spaces. You get that sense of that.
Yeah. 100%. I feel like you're speaking directly to like what I, maybe what was pulling me and what I was responding to. What about yourself?
I got here in '77. To be honest, the first time I got here, my sister and my mother and I were running away from my dad. So we ended up in Hollywood Boulevard, and it was such a wild space. Like it was dark and everything had red lights, and there were like 24/7. But I really liked it. It was so hot, physically hot. And my mother had the idea that we would dress up as like Goofy and go to Disneyland and take pictures of people. Like, I was sort of like, I think they probably thought of that, like Disney might have that going on. But my mother kind of helped me get through this trouble with snacks. Like she would give like Twinkies and so there's like an association for me with like heat, snacks, sex, kind of everything I love in LA.
I think we all would love to hear about how you relate to each other's work, and also where is the overlap for you? I mean, tell us the story. What's the origin story?
Oh, Marielle, no?
Yeah, Marielle, for those of you that are not familiar with her and her work, you should be. But Marielle very generously opened up her living room for a group of performance artists to meet routinely once a month to perform with each other, no audience, and then share dinner. And committed to doing that for several years. And that's where I, like personally, I guess, first interacted with you. And I don't remember exactly like what those interactions were.
Yeah.
It was such a special, intimate, really powerful space. I think that space has informed so many people's approach to performance, whether it be an intuitive process or modes of improvisation, ways of engaging collaboratively with one another. But I remember at least hearing your voice, because the one rule is that you can't sit and watch, you have to perform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember feeling your body. Yeah.
Might be true.
Yeah. It's very, like those, I can sort of still feel your, weight and skin. But it does make me think back, like the first installation I saw of yours was Human Resources, right? And were you moving with Nichols at that time? That was a while ago. Yeah, that was such a beautiful, deep, resonant moment, and the whole piece was so beautiful. And,
thank you.
Like somehow it made me feel like blood and sand and desire and the weight of another body and yours and care and all those things that were seemed like so much in your work all the time.
Yeah, I remember I had been within their own respective practices responding to a lot of like the very gory medical violence that we were seeing like published on newspapers or like on TV, and coming back and having those conversations and thinking about like how maybe representations of violence or violence itself or these things that maybe people relate to violence come into my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking a lot about like thinking about the audience in a very different way that I was thinking about them before. Like maybe more like passive, someone that's there to like watch and receive, maybe be entertained to some degree. But they're like very intimate interactions with like my brother.
Yeah.
This was like right after the verdict of George Zimmerman, murder of Treadwell Martin, had been made public. And so there was a piece that happened on the sidewalk before we went into the space. Right. And then there was like a tearing down of a domestic piece of like a couch, a family couch.
Right. Yeah.
And then like an improvised kind of like movement piece with Nichols, where we're just carrying each other for the duration of, I don't remember how long, but we're just kind of like carrying each other's body to the ground, picking each other back up to a point of exhaustion. But I remember thinking of like, oh, like this is, it felt like maybe I was asking the audience to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
It feels like you're experiencing what it's like to be in a body. The play that I remember the most is one where I was also touched by you via this huge tongue that came out of the stage. It was Purple Electric Play, and it was at Machine Projects.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember just walking into the space, walking down into the theater, and being amazed at just that, like the build out of the theater, and how that was already kind of like an experience. I remember there was like a hole in the ceiling that someone fell through, and there's like so much of so many of your plays that didn't make sense to me. And maybe to many people.
Yeah, or to anyone. Yeah.
But there's like, I remember leaving with that question of like, why did theater like lick me? You know? Why did it desire me?
Yeah, that's such a good question.
Yeah, and so but I was thinking, like, I left thinking with like, you know, the best conversations after watching a performance are kind of like on the way to the place where you're supposed to have like a conversation over coffee or a meal or something. And I remember talking about that, like what your relationship to audience was. Because I felt very like considered in that moment.
That's cool. Yeah, that was Machine Project. Mark Allen, kudos to him and Lucas and all the people who participated in making that. Machine Project is exceptional. I mean, I think most people who are here probably do know Machine Project, but I think they started, 2003, and then ended in 2017, and it was storefront space, and Mark Allen, who ran it, and many other people who facilitated it, Zoot Lors, other people, Elizabeth Klein, etc., lots of different people. They allowed so many things to happen. I mean, honestly, we cut into their basement, and with their encouragement and desire. Like, you know, they cut into an apartment upstairs. They took all the floorboards and put them on a steel plank, so that we could have a show like on a 30-degree ramp. And then they put it all back, and they were just kind of extraordinary in the risk that they would take, and the trust in artists. There was no, like, you can't do that, or what will people think? You know, it's like, no, not at all. A lot of liberation. Even though I've worked in, like, great spaces with great people, there are just real barriers, you know, and there are different, you know, there are boundaries that you probably don't want to cross or can't cross, which does make me, you know, not to, like, dig through the topic here, but, like, a museum around performance is a really interesting thought. Like, how does that function?
I mean, I feel like there's been like the large kind of like very popular like performance art surveys that has made maybe performance more desirable in institutions like collecting museums. But I think, I don't know, for me, performance is still like this place that still holds the power to kind of like resist being commodified, consumed.
Yes.
And it really does, like, with the exception, like if you're working with video or photography, live performance, you always just have your memory of it to come back to. You know, like with a painting or with an object, you have the thing to always come back to consider, to think about, to refer back to. But with live performance, it's just your experience of it. And I love that. I love like the possibility of, like the myth-making possibilities of that, like how people talk about performance, how people share it with each other, how it evolves over time, and yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought fully around like how to engage with and that's been, I feel like maybe in some ways it's been kind of like responding to maybe the ways that we've known institutions to function, right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like it's our duty to challenge institutions and to a certain degree to like really provoke them. If that's the job, then I really have to do it, you know? And I'm just curious, like, whether museums or any museum can really take that. And then also what we risk in an institution, because how much of our desire to get over or to be, you know, whatever important, et cetera, then starts to blunt the work, if at all. I mean, I don't know if that's the case for you, but I worry about that in myself.
Maybe in the arc of like a practice, there are performances or there's work that feels integral to like one's process, and then there are like and then there are things that one does that enables one to like make their work present in a space. And so I wouldn't like I don't consider myself someone that makes work like that's about institutional critique necessarily, right? But sometimes like that relationship is inadvertently kind of like informed by how the museum like logistically has to deal with like a material that I'm working with, right? Like the bricks that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
That though it's been shown like at the Whitney and at the Hammer, they've been like in kind of like marginal spaces, either outdoors or in a gallery, kind of like separated from the main galleries. So yeah, I feel like maybe there's been moments where I felt like there's ways to kind of like maneuver around or fold into your work some of these experiences, but I don't think that's an intention of the work also, right? It's kind of like, it's hard to, it could be burdensome. I feel like what's exciting to think about, like, if we're imagining like future institutions, it'd be exciting to, like you mentioned, Joanna had this incredible idea of saying that, like, if there is like a performance art venue, it should have a drain.
Yes.
Like somewhere like in a gallery.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And then maybe like start thinking about like how specific a performance art venue could be, right?
Yeah.
What would that look like for you?
Oh my God. I mean, it would be so cool to have like contraptions like fly space and hooks and drains and like doors that open to places you don't want to
Trick
go.
doors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Those Michael Jackson pop-up door. Like, I think like, right? Like flexibility, play. There's a sort of nefarious play that I think is always around performance. Like there's always a jabbing and a prodding, not always, but often, you know. Yeah, I mean, the making space for bodies, first of all. Like, I think bodies are often a problem in museums, you know. Like, obviously, objects are privileged in museums. That's what they're there for, essentially. But, yeah, like, where do bodies go? And bodies smell, and bodies sweat, and bodies are problematic, and you know, they run around and they lose things, and you know, like I think there's like space for that. I think would be incredible. And I also wonder, like in my own practice, like I think my strategy, if anything, they're built into the work, is like a kind of provocation of the unconscious of the creative class, whatever that means. So, because I kind of know, at least in the present, my work is basically viewed by creative people. And there's a sort of an assumption, I would assume, that that there's maybe a political leaning to the left or progressive sensibility. And to a certain extent, I think that some of that's false. And I'm curious about that in myself, and I'm curious about violence in myself, and I'm curious about my own lies. And I think in a, you know, in a space where that kind of provocation can happen internally, you know, I would love to be able to make space for content that doesn't always play to the crowd, you know what I mean? And where maybe programming accepts some inherent psychological risk, which who knows what that looks like, you know, or who knows if that's even possible. But I think it does look like a kind of intimacy that can be very frictive. It can be difficult. You know, it's not easy to act. Looks easy. That's because people work and work and work and work and work to make it look easy. But there is a in my practice, I guess it would look like safety for all the mess that is inherent in dealing with people's psyches. I'm not that great at it, to be honest, you know. I have a personality that's a little like here sometimes, gone sometimes. So, like, which is, you know, just trying to be honest about it. But I think, not that that's okay, but that as an audience member, for example, I personally like to see work that has the kind of labor that your own work has, that has the kind of aesthetic and artistic integrity that your work has, and like a kind of a psychological, emotional, physical investment that happens over time. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, time is so critical.
Right.
You know?
But, I mean, could we, like, stay on this a little bit? Because
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious to, like, I guess you, like, saying, or you feel like you're not that great at it, but what it yields is, like, looks incredible on stage. And so I'm like, I'm curious about, like, yeah, like, how do you, there's clearly, like, care somewhere along the process.
Somewhere along. Yeah.
How do you manage that? Like, how do you manage, like, not in this, like, kind of, like, self-carry, like, like, type of way, but, like, how do you sustain your practice, like, thinking long-term? Like, how have you, like, been able to do it?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I think it's like, because the actors are so inspiring and so good, the first thing is like, and maybe this is, you know, me blowing my own horn or whatever, but I feel like I can see people's brilliance very readily. Like, you know, it's clear to me, even when in the beginning of a performance, you know, you're obviously struggling. You're obviously like, I don't understand what this is, or like, I want to bring this, but I don't know how. For whatever reason, I feel like I can see that already. So the question is, how do we get you to this destination, number one? But number two, my work is really drawn from the actors. So often I will talk to people for a very, I mean, our practice is like a year for each show, or even more, where we talk about, like, what do you want to do? Who are you? Artistically, what do you want to achieve? And we kind of dig through it, and I'll write a little bit, and they'll read a little bit, and we'll dig again, and so forth. So I don't really know, like, what it's like to go through the depths of confrontation with one's own psyche and what it can do to a person, and then have to perform that publicly and have to speak, you know, somebody else's text that kind of sometimes comes out of your mouth, that came out of your mouth first and ends up on a page, like what that would be like. So, and I guess the trust is there because it happens. And I do think that there is a form of love that kind of happens within work. Like, I think there's something about labor and work and, like, showing up every day, doing it over and over and over, that is trust, you know? Because I really believe in work. I do think it's important to keep thinking about what performance, specifically performance art or theater, or, you know, however you want to take our practices. What it does, like how does it do? How does it become effective? Is there a point at which it's just sort of like an echo chamber? Because I think that's a real possibility, at least I would say for my own practice. I can't speak for anyone else. And so in the moment I am really thinking about, like, if we're speaking to, let's just say, I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong in saying that the creative classes, generally speaking, tend to be on the left. That could, in my world, okay, I don't know, because I live in Los Angeles, I show in galleries and museums. What is useful for us now? Because, and I don't have the answer to that, but there's something that has to kind of break apart. And I'm personally just interested in, just generally speaking, my own violence. And I think it's really important to own one's own violence, to not say it's these people over here, it's me, okay? And what part of that and I'm just going to broad brush myself as an American, what part of that is so deeply ingrained in me as an American? And I will even go so far as to saying, like, a trans man. Like, what can I critique around that? What can I open up in that is useful for us? Not, not just for, I don't know, an exercise. You know what I'm saying? Because there's just a lot on the line at the moment. And I can't say that I know the answer to the question, but I'm definitely thinking a lot about that. So it's a really important question. But I also think it's possible, since, so many of us, and we all know each other, a lot of us, like, we can talk to each other. Like, there's something to be said about getting in a room together and thinking through these questions as a group. Not that we have to agree, but, I think it's useful if we